Good evening, one and all present here. We are starting the session with the topic Brief Psychotherapy by Dr. Anurag Srivastav. The session will be chaired by Dr. G. Ramanujam. I welcome you to the dais, sir.
S. Vinay Kumar. Actually, they have added my father's name as well. My name is Vinay Kumar. Vinay Kumar only.
Okay, sir.
They have added my father's name as S. My father's name starts with S.
Okay. So the session will be chaired by Dr. Vinay Kumar and Dr. G. Ramanujam. I welcome Dr. Vinay Kumar and Dr. G. Ramanujam to the dais, sir. Dr. S. Vinay Kumar, President, Indian Psychiatric Eastern Journal Branch, EC Coordinator, Publication Committee, IPS, Post Honorary of General Secretary, Indian Psychiatric Society, 2018 to 20, Secretary, Suicidology Specialty Session, WASP, Honorary Treasurer, Indian Association for Social Psychiatry, 2017 to 21. Chairperson, Publication Committee, Indian Psychiatric Society, 2016 to 2018. Past Honorary Treasurer, Indian Psychiatric Society, 2012 to 2016. Past Chairperson, Election Commission, Indian Psychiatric Society. Editor, Manoda Digest, First Hindi Mental Health Magazine. Chairperson, Vijay Memorial Trust, Consultant Psychiatrist, Manawad Mind Hospital and Research Center. Dr. G. Ramanujam, Associate Professor of Psychiatry at Tirunelveli Medical College, former Associate Professor at Chengalpattu Medical College, worked at Kilpak Medical College. Now the session is over to the chairperson.
Thank you very much for a nice introduction. Now it's time to welcome today's speaker, Dr. Anurag Srivastav. Anurag is from Hyderabad, a person devoted to the field of psychotherapy. And when we think about psychotherapy, only few faces appear in front of our eyes. And Dr. Anurag is one of them. May I request you to show his CV? May I request you kindly show his CV? PowerPoint? Okay, fine. So, there are few formal things that must be said while introducing the speaker. Dr. Anurag is Professor and Head Department of Psychiatry, Medicity Institute of Medical Sciences, Hyderabad, Telangana. He is a student-centered professor with 20 years of expertise in psychiatry and psychoanalytic psychotherapy. He is also developing a neuroscience-based contemporary psychoanalytic model of psychotherapy in the Indian setting. His Realistic Movie Club is helping many individuals to build skills in psychodynamic formulations, a fusion of art and science, and a foray into the social aspects of cinema. So, but apart from this, the thing is, Anurag is basically now a psychotherapist, a model psychotherapist, a person who can teach. He reminds me of Dr. Salman Akhtar, who started his journey as a student of PGI as a MD Psychiatry, and after that, he went to US, trained himself as psychiatrist there, but after that he decided to move to psychoanalysis, and now he's psychoanalyst only. So he reminds me of Salman Akhtar whenever his name comes to my mind. So with these few words, now I would like to comment on the Ramanujam, would like to comment? Okay, so fine. Just brief psychotherapy. I'll say a few words, and after that I'll hand over to my co-chairperson to introduce the topic. Brief psychotherapy, I think, in my opinion, is the need of time. We all, those who are practicing, especially in private practice setup, they feel that something should be in our hand which can be delivered as per demand. Because patients don't come to us to get analyzed. Again, I'll remember Dr. Salman Akhtar. Once I was interviewing him and I asked, Dr. Akhtar, you left psychiatry, you went to psychoanalysis, and you are helping only few people. Do you feel that you are doing injustice? Because everybody can't contact you. Everybody can't pay the fee you charge. So, do you feel guilty of this? He was a little bit disturbed. Then he said, yes, I feel. The thing is, from there I would like to come to today's topic, the brief psychotherapy, is probably the answer. In my opinion, the word brief psychotherapy is a bit trivializing the basic essence of the thing which is discussed in psychotherapy. Brief, the moment you say, it means you are cutting corners. But the thing is, brief psychotherapy is basically problem-focused, solution-focused. So, I'll request Dr. Anurag to think on this and rename it, because that will add some glory to this module of treatment. With these few words, I hand over to my co-chairperson, Dr. Ramanujam.
Thank you, the organizers, for giving me this opportunity. And just a few words, as my chairperson said, psychotherapy, brief psychotherapy is the need of the hour, because we live in a fast world. Everything we need to be precise and concise and time-bound. So previously, psychoanalysis, the end point was either the death of the patient or the death of the psychoanalyst. That was the joke they used to say about psychoanalysis. But that is not possible in Freudian time. So, or sometimes the breakage of the sofa that results in the end of the psychoanalytic session. So at this juncture, all psychotherapies can be brief and focused, time-bound, including psychodynamic psychotherapy or interpersonal psychotherapy. All has to be delivered to the point, to the needed, and that can be done. So as we are advancing towards one side, psychiatry is a wonderful subject. Instead, on one aspect, we are dealing at the molecular level. So many drugs and receptors have been developed. At the same time, we should not lose the humanistic touch, and psychotherapy is one of the arts. And the art cannot be taught fully, but somehow it has to be taught, at least the basics. And brief psychotherapy will help us. Definitely, I am confident that this session will help the students and faculty members to renew their interest in psychotherapies. With these few words, I hand over the session to the speaker.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful words. I will give a small vignette about Salman Akhtar Saab in the middle of this somehow. Can we get the slide there, please? So what we are planning to do is that we have 1 hour, sir?
1 hour.
Right. So we are going to divide this into 3 sessions, 20-25 minutes. I'm trying to explain what I have been doing in the last 20-25 years. Then we are going to have a small case vignette with a role play of the part of a session to illustrate what we are doing. In the last 10-15 minutes, we want to keep for interaction. So why is this brief psychotherapy? Dr. Vinay was saying that, oh, psychotherapy, like it takes time. So why is this brief psychotherapy? Because this was the topic which was already available for the conference. And I always say that I am like the CIA, I'll sleep with anybody. So if I am given a chance to present the work and they say that you have to call it brief psychotherapy, I will accept it. And then we will say what we want to say, then after that nobody can do anything, right? So this is not really going to be so brief as you think it is going to be. So that is one of the things. So I want to first start with a counter question. We always talk about cut it short. So I have a counter question. What is the hurry? What is the hurry? Most of the people who will come into psychotherapy will be people with chronic, relapsing depressions, anxieties. They will be people with personality disorders, with somatoform disorders. These disorders last a lifetime. So why are we in so much of a hurry? It is not like our other therapies are doing wonders. We are the probably one specialty who can say that I have been treating this guy for 20 years. 20 years. He's had 18 episodes of, 9 episodes of mania and 10 episodes of depression. He's still coming to me, I'm treating him. So are we treating him? We have to understand the limits and limitations of the interventions that we have. Can psychotherapy treat people with psychosis? No. With bipolar disorder? No. Endogenous, deep, severe depressions? Not likely. OCD, psychodynamic psychotherapy, very bad results. But there are many cases in which it can help. So first of all, I would like to say that most of our disorders are chronic, relapsing disorders. Treatments are likely to last for a long time also, but we are still going to cut it short. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. Is this a departure from the dogma? Very much so. In this entire presentation, you're not going to hear id, ego, superego. You're not going to hear Oedipus complex. You're not going to hear anal stage and oral stage and phallic stage. Probably a little bit about defenses in a light-hearted way, but that is all. The work I am presenting today is not based on other people's work. This is entirely what we have learned in our 20-25 years of experience. So today I'm not talking about Peter Sifnios, Habib Davanloo, Michael Balint, all the great people who have done short-term dynamic psychotherapy. I'm not talking about them. So you have to bear with me a little bit on this. If it is possible for you to forget what you have learned about psychodynamic psychotherapy, so that is easy because most of you may not have learned much at all. I never learned anything in my psychiatry teaching. 3 years of MD psychiatry. I do have a MD psychiatry degree, sir. I actually have a photograph of it in one of my presentations. I show it to remind myself, first of all, that I am still a psychiatrist, you know. Because everybody, when people look at me, so they say, oh, psychodynamic psychotherapy, and you know, like then they move away. And I never get invited to people's parties. I never get invited back. Suppose they make a mistake of calling me once, that's it. Second invitation will never happen. Okay, all right, this is the guy who will read us here and he'll talk about the phallic stage in the middle of my daughter's birthday party. So obviously nobody wants us there. One of the important things is we have to get rid of this jargon. This club which these psychoanalysts have made, in which they will talk about things which nobody can understand. Psychoanalysts can't understand also. And because of this jargon, brilliant people, young minds, senior people are turned off by this nonsense. We are talking about NMDA receptors. We are talking how the AMP receptors have to send over a calcium so that the magnesium ion will be removed from the channel, and now the channel can open and calcium can flow inside, and now you are talking about malignant regression and pathogenic reintroduction as a defense against psychic decompensation. This is nonsense. We have to get rid of this. We have to use. There are some wonderful things about psychoanalysis, and we must learn to use them correctly. And we have to keep up with the times, and we have to move away from a lot of these things which don't make sense anymore. A lot of that is speculation, And a lot of that is fantastical theory which nobody can believe, and it doesn't make sense that there's a paranoid schizoid position in a 9-month-old infant and he feels that the bad mother is going to destroy the... What is that nonsense? How do you know all this? With due respect to Salman Akhtar Sahab, I'll give an example from there, sir. Are you friends with him? Oh my God. Okay, Salman Akhtar Sahab is Javed Akhtar's brother, the famous poet Javed Akhtar, his own brother. He trained in PGI Chandigarh under Dr. N.N. Vig, one of our legends of psychiatry, and then moved to the United States. He did the right thing, because that is the place where you can see 5 patients in a day, charge them $500 an hour, and say that. So when he told sir that, yeah, I regret that I'm not able to see many people, he's lying. He's lying. You know, I'll answer that question about how many people to see, how much time do we have, and all that. So Salman Akhtar Sahab, when he came to India, sponsored by Sun Pharma, if I remember, Sun Pharma sponsored a pharmaceutical giant, sponsored a psychoanalyst to come to India. Can you imagine that? Anyways. So he gave the example of a girl who used to pluck her hair, trichotillomania, pluck her hair, and a bald spot was left. During the course of the analysis, he extracted that history from her, not extracted, she told him that when she was little, because her parents were very busy, when she used to get hurt, her grandfather used to put balm and, you know, comfort her and dress her the wound and all. And there was a time in which she was hurt, a portion of her scalp was wounded and the skin shaved off, and there was a bald spot there, and her grandfather very lovingly and caringly took care of it. And he nursed that area back to health, and she got her hair back. Now what is happening is that from there, when she's plucking her hair out, Salman Akhtar Sahab drew the conclusion that she wants to go back to that time when she had lost the hair and she got so much love and care and affection from her grandfather, and she's regressed to that time. She's done that. So far so good. It is still a little bit of a stretch, but so far so good. Then he went one step further. And that has what put psychoanalysis out of the minds of all psychiatrists, and they say that, come on, what is this? He said that this can be interpreted as the girl symbolically plucking out her pubic hair in order to go back to a pre-pubertal level where the sexual conflicts did not exist. I'm surprised nobody left the room. What is this? Where did this come from? There is no evidence to support these kind of things. This is fantasy. A lot of this is seen as fantasy in the minds of the psychoanalyst. You know, it's like that thing, the guy, there's this guy who went to the psychoanalyst, and the psychoanalyst said, I'll do a Rorschach test for you. So he gave him one card. He said, oh my God, these are 2 people having sex together. He said, okay. What about this? Oh, these are 3 people having sex together. The psychoanalyst is blinking at him and says, what about this one? Oh, these are multiple people having sex together. So the psychoanalyst took off his glasses and said, I'm sorry to say, sir, but you are a very disturbed person. That guy looked at him and says, you are showing me these dirty pictures and I am the disturbed guy. So, you know, psychoanalysis has become like that. What fantastical things are there in your mind? You are saying that in those theories which most of the people, you know, like their eyes will go wide. Now we want to move away from that. So what we are doing here is all this jargon, all this complexity, speculation, and fantastic theory is being removed. We will work only with what the patient has told us. We will work only with the information given to us by the patient, and no assumptions, no fantasy, no imagination is required. If you are as dull as I am, as stupid as I am, then this is for you. If you are smarter than me, then you will do an excellent job at this. And if you are really, you know, gifted, then you will do miracles. So the first thing that we are going to do in the technique is, this is all this thing that we have to have transference. That is, the emotions which the patient brings from his past life and transfers onto the therapist. And then we must interpret that transference. That is how we are going to get results. This was at a time when people were coming 5 days a week in Europe. Monday to Friday, after work, let's go to the psychotherapist. Who will come 5 days a week today? People will not even come twice a week. Thrice a week is very difficult. Most of the people are happy with once a week. Once a week psychotherapy, where is the transference going to develop? It doesn't develop. It doesn't develop. It does develop. It doesn't develop soon enough. It doesn't develop with intensity. And if we are going to follow the old dogma that interpret the transference, then it will take years. As sir said, therapist will die. Therapist will die, the patient will not get better. So one of the things that we are radically moving away from, I wrote a paper on this. TSS Rao sir is not there, right? He rejected the paper. He said it is not fit for publication on RAG. What is this nonsense? How dare you say that transferential interpretations are not important? You are going against Ernest Jones, against Sigmund Freud himself. I said, okay, sir. So then finally I caught hold of my friend Sri Lakshmi. She published it in Andhra Pradesh Journal of Psychological Medicine. It got published. But what I'm saying here is that it is possible to interpret from the patient's story, from what they tell us, the facts which they have given us, no imagination, no speculation, no need for these complicated theories of anal stage and all that. And you can make a difference, you can succeed. You can succeed. Why I have become so confident is 25 years, 739 patients, 27 failures. I am telling you, this works. No matter what Ernest Jones has said. And the other thing which we have found, it is not the sexual conflict which causes neurosis. Yes, there may be some cases in which there is a sexual conflict, but libido as the source of neurosis, I have not found. And so I refuse to follow a dogma that there has to be a libidinal development which has to follow through those stages and there has to be an oral stage. Is it there? Must be there. Is it important in conflict? Maybe. If it is there, I'm not against it. But if it is not there, we are not going to try to fit the case into the theory. So what has happened is that we have found something else. Again and again and again. What we have found is that people who are struggling today are struggling because of adverse childhood events. And those adverse childhood events are responsible for the pathology in today's life. And I will tell you, in all the cases that I have seen, I have never seen a patient who did not have a conflict in the past which was significant. We have never had this that I worked with this guy for 15 sessions. I couldn't find anything. I didn't find anything in his past. Oh my God, I'm charging him so many thousands an hour and I have nothing to show for it. At the end of the day, what I'll do is I will increase Citalin to 20 milligrams. That won't go down well with the patient, right? That he'll say, what the hell are you doing? The thing is, it has never happened. We have always found these adverse events, and the base of that is the long ago study, 1998 study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, Relationship of Childhood Abuse and Household Dysfunction to many of the leading causes of deaths in adults, and the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. And to connect this to psychoanalysis is a paper written 107 years ago. 107 years ago. Many of us may not be that old, right? Remembering, Repeating and Working Through completes works of Sigmund Freud, 1914 publication. These are the only two things I'm going to quote. So in this ACE study, what they did was they looked at abuse, psychological, physical and sexual, that people had experienced, and household dysfunction. In household dysfunction, they looked at four things. Is there substance abuse? Is there a mental illness? Is there a violence, especially against the lady of the house, the mother? And is there any criminal history? And in that study, they found that any category reported was 52%. That means more than half of the people in that survey reported at least one of these adverse childhood events in their lives. Now, here is the wonderful thing. If you look at people with 2 or more weeks of depressed mood, means basically the criteria for depression, if you look at people who have had no such adverse events, prevalence was 14.2. 4 or more of those 7 adverse events, 50.7. The adjusted odds ratio was 4.6. It is profoundly significant. Same thing with attempted suicides. No adverse event, prevalence was 1.2%. 4 or more adverse events, prevalence was 18.3%. Alcoholism, 2.9 versus 16.1, adjusted odds ratio 7.4. Ever injected drugs, no adverse events 0.3, 4 or more 3.4, odds ratio 10.3. Now I will go so far as to say that all cases of resistant depression, anxiety, recurrent depression are not because the medications are not working. We know the medications work. They will work, they will do what they are supposed to do, but they can't they can't create a miracle. So what is happening is that if we work with these adverse childhood events and the impact they have on today's life, then we are going to be able to solve any case of resistant depression, personality disorder and their problems, and anxiety disorders. Now, abuse is an epidemic. This study reported nearly one-third of students had been physically abused. And it is estimated that for every child who reports an abuse, there are 15 or 20 who don't. This is so rampant that in our country, the cultural thing comes into play. A lot of people believe that physical abuse is essential, spare the rod and spoil the child, the English saying, because it inculcates good behaviors, it improves grades in school, and the child becomes disciplined. This is a government report. 2 out of 3, every 3 children in India are physically abused, and every second child is reported to be facing emotional abuse. This is from our South India. Nearly half of the people have been mocked, more than half of the people said they were beaten, out of which nearly 1/7 have required medical treatment for that abuse. The worst thing is emotional abuse. Now, emotional abuse, some people have divided it into emotional neglect and emotional abuse. Now, if you look at emotional abuse, the impact of emotional abuse is far more direct than emotional neglect. Emotional abuse has been linked to specific pathologies. Depression and anxiety is, of course, alcoholism, but it has been linked to the development of borderline, basically cluster B personality disorders, borderline, narcissistic, antisocial, and schizotypal personality disorder, while emotional neglect is more of cluster A and cluster C. Schizoid, avoidant, obsessive. Well, obsessive doesn't link so well, but avoidant, people with low self-esteem. That evidence is so strong. There are thousands of papers on this now. Now, what happens when there is an early event like that? It shapes the course for the rest of life. It isn't that the child is not a miniature adult. When the child is growing up, the trauma which is happening in child makes a huge impact later on in life. It's like this. Suppose you imagine that we fire a shot at the moon. If at the beginning of its journey, the shot deviates by 1 mm, it will miss the moon by thousands of miles. If the deviation happens late in the course, it is 1 meter above the surface of the moon and it deviates 1 mm, nothing will happen. It will still hit the moon maybe 1 mm away. Events which happen early in life are the ones which impact us the most. So, this trauma remains, it is stored by our amygdala. And it remains and it influences our life for the rest of our life. A trauma which stops in childhood does not stop having its impact in childhood. Can you read this? Is it too small or the letters are jumbled? I couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. Using the incredible power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Amazing, huh? Yeah, and I always thought spelling was important. See if your friends can read this too. So I have not memorized this. If I had that much memory, if I was that smart, I would never have come into medicine, right? So I have not memorized this. Any of you can read this. That is because we use prediction. Prediction is very important in making sense of things, otherwise we'd be gajini. We'll forget everything and we'll have to make sense of everything. But prediction, we make use of the past to make sense of the present. And that is very good for us because it spares the cerebral cortex the effort, but it is very bad for us because whatever is the trauma of the past will continue to inform the present. It will continue to inform the present. And therefore, a situation from the past which has generated anxiety will generate anxiety today, even though today in this situation there is no need for that anxiety. Because the brain has to use past experience in order to make sense of the present. This was what was said in this 1914 paper. We may say that the patient does not remember anything that of what he has forgotten and repressed, but he acts it out. He reproduces it not as a memory, but as an action. He repeats it without, of course, knowing that he is repeating it. I don't know why everybody always takes advantage of me, sir. They keep giving me the same work. I don't know why it is happening to me. I keep failing in anything that I try to do. You see, people cannot recall all of those things which have happened and the impact they have had on them. What they will do is, they will put it into action in their lives. And our job is to bring to their attention that this is the pattern which is coming from your childhood, which you are acting out, and when you make the person remember it and work through it, then he stops repeating it. Because if they keep repeating it, that dysfunctional pattern keeps the depression alive. It keeps the depression alive. We must be prepared to find, therefore, that the patient yields to the compulsion to repeat, which now replaces the impulsion to remember, not only in his personal attitude to his doctor, which is the transference, but also also in every other activity and relationship which may occupy his life at the time. And this is what we use for non-transferential interpretations. We use the story of his life to show him what is happening, and we don't have to just rely on the transference. If the patient starts his treatment under the auspices of a mild and unpronounced positive transference, it makes it possible for him at first to unearth his memories. When you start the therapy, a lot of people will give you a lot of information. They are willing to give you information, they share things with you, and then it slows down. But as analysis proceeds, remembering at once gives way to acting out, because that remembering is causing distress. And how can you avoid the distress? You don't remember anymore, and you translate it into action. That is how we avoid the distress. From then on, the resistances determine the sequence of the material which is to be repeated. The patient brings out from the armory of the past the weapons with which he defends himself against the progress of treatment. That means people will try to not remember those traumatic things and act it out. So for example, I have been criticized a lot. I have been told I am no good. I cannot do anything. I am going to be a failure. I am not going to succeed. So what happens is that I don't want to take on a new task. I don't want to be visible. I want to be hidden. I don't want to be in the limelight. I don't want a responsibility to come on me. That is how the person will behave. Will say that I am failing at everything, sir. I never succeed. Other people are succeeding. That is because he can't bear to remember. He acts it out. So for example, we have to be prepared that we must bring into his awareness, into his conscious sphere, everything which he is trying to keep in the motor sphere. And as sir has said, sir, please, one must allow the patient time to become more conversant with this resistance, with which he has to now become acquainted, to work through it, to overcome it, by continuing in defiance of it the analytic work, the course of which cannot be avoided, nor always hastened. We cannot hasten it beyond a point. All right. What is the work that we have to do? The work is basically connecting those patterns of the past to the current things. I'm going to skip this a little bit, but basically what is going to work? How are we going to do this? What is in the amygdala, hippocampus, has to be brought to the attention of the prefrontal cortex. Let me do that. So in a fear response, if you see the input from the hippocampus and the sensory inputs going to the basal amygdala and the lateral nucleus goes to the central nucleus and generates a fear response. But if the hippocampus is now able to give to the infralimbic nuclei of the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the whole fear response is extinct. In order to extinguish the fear response, you must bring the ventromedial prefrontal cortex into play. You must make it conscious, and that is what we are doing. So what we are going to do is, we are unlearning a previously learned conditioned response, which requires consciousness and the learning of a new type of response and the growth of new brain connections in the prefrontal cortex, which serve to inhibit the original conditioned learning stored in subcortical sites. That means, from the subcortical side, we have to make it come to the attention of the prefrontal cortex. We make the unconscious conscious. So no jargon here. You sit down with the patient, you give them time, you hear their story, you look at the adverse childhood events, you look at the trauma, you see what is happening there, you connect it to the present, you make it conscious, and your problem is solved. That's it. That is psychoanalysis. Can I have the Word document? Now I'm going to show you in the next 10 minutes or so a patient I worked with a couple of years ago. I'm going to show you a brief history, and then we are going to have a small role play. I have two of my friends here, psychoanalytic psychotherapists, Dr. Navita and Dr. Mona Lisa, and they have very kindly agreed. One will be a therapist and one will be a patient. I don't know who is going to be which. Dr. Navita is going to be the therapist, and I'm going to show you this history. So this girl, we'll call her Geeta. Her name is not Geeta, but we'll call her Geeta. She's in her late 20s. She's a professional. She had been having multiple bouts of recurrent depression over the past 10 years. She's been put on many antidepressants, all of which have worked, but then she's had multiple relapses. Most of the times initially she used to stop the treatment, but lately she was not stopping the treatment. She was getting the relapses. The medications were increased and they used to work. When she came to me, she was on 112.5 milligrams of venlafaxine, and I increased to 150 milligrams and then went up by another 37.5, and then we took her into therapy. Now what has happened with this lady is that her parents had a very bad marriage. There was a lot of physical violence at home. The father used to hit his wife. She observed all of this. She was very traumatized by it. Even more so because when she was really little, her dad was actually the one who was more kind to her, paid attention to her. She had a good relationship with him. But as time went by, and her mother was a little strict, do your homework, do things on time, don't do this, don't do that. She was actually closer to her dad. But then the dad became more and more preoccupied with his things. It turned out that he was having an extramarital affair. He had another family in another part of the city. And he was violent towards the mother. And then she became increasingly afraid of the father and distant from him. And then she went through a lot of trauma because of that. And she could not bear the physical beatings which the father was, like beating the mother. The mother continued to be a little distant and aloof and strict. But she was heavily in favor of her son. She used to favor the son all the time, and this used to really get this girl. She spent her life trying to win the affection and be in the good books of her mother, as her brother used to do effortlessly without doing anything. So now what has happened is that even though the mother is not very affectionate or, soft towards her or praising her, she has spent her life in a relationship where she tries to be a person who wins the affection of the mother. Now, what we have done here is that we have taken a session when she was around 3 months in, about 12, 13 sessions in, and that small vignette we will present to you. Can we have a couple of chairs here and 2 mics? 2 mics? Couple of chairs here? 2 chairs? 2 chairs? 2 mics. The important thing in this session is the role of guilt in maintenance of depression. Guilt in the maintenance of depression and the inability of escitalopram to get rid of guilt. These things have to be worked through. Did her depression lift? Yeah, depression lifted, but it relapses. Every time there is an incident which brings back that thing, the thing relapses. This is the text. I'm sorry, it's a little small. You may not be able to read it, but that will go ahead, Dr. Navita and Dr. Mona Lisa. Thank you very much, first of all. It takes great courage to do what they are doing. So please be kind. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, Gita. How are things with you?
Switch it.
Sir. I'm fine, Gita. How are things with you?
Not so good, ma'am. I had a fight with my mother. She called me yesterday and she asked me to help with her bank issues. She always does that, ma'am. I told her I don't want to be involved in this and to ask my brother for help. But she says that he does not listen. So even though I don't want to, I agreed to help her and I asked her for the password. I knew that something was wrong when she hesitated. I told her that I must have the password if I'm supposed to help her. If you don't want to give the password, why did you call me? Actually, ma'am, I understood why she was reluctant. She said that, no, it's not that. I'm scared that you will get angry when I tell you the password. I knew then what she was going to say. The password will be a combination of my brother's name and his date of birth or something, ma'am. It's always like that. She never keeps the details of me or my details as the password. It is always my brother's. He never does anything. I will do everything, but she will never put my name. All these years, I do everything, but she runs behind my brother. He is so irresponsible. He will make her beg for money. I gave so much money to my mother, ma'am, but she never acknowledges it. She praises him even if he is rude to her. I was very hurt, ma'am, so I just cut the call.
I have noticed that you try very hard to be in your mother's good books, despite being disappointed so many times. I wonder what drives you.
It is because she has sacrificed so much for us, ma'am. She had a very hard life, but she bore it all. She suffered a lot and I feel for her, ma'am.
I understand she had a hard life.
Yes, ma'am. I feel so guilty, so I try to keep doing things for her.
Why do you feel guilty?
Because she told me many times that I am in this marriage only for you. That is why I bear the beatings and the abuse. So I feel responsible for that. She suffered because of me, so I can't stop trying to help her even if she ignores my efforts.
I'm not sure that I understand. You feel guilty that she stayed in this abusive marriage because of you, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that that is the reason she stayed in the marriage? How was it good for you if she stayed in the marriage?
Yeah, ma'am. It was not good for me or anybody.
Could it be that other factors like finances of the families, societal pressures had a role in this?
At this point, the patient starts to weep. So she cried for 5 to 6 minutes. Yes, ma'am, it was because of the money. I remember that she said many times that if she had the money, she would have had a different life. But she keeps telling me otherwise also, that she stayed because of me. I believed her for so long. Then the patient started to weep again. Ma'am, I can't believe I spent so much of my life thinking that this was true. I feel so relieved. It was not me. It was because she has her own reasons. And you know, ma'am, she never told my brother that. She always put it on me, and I believed her. I felt so guilty all my life. But now I understand, ma'am, that it was her decision, not because of me. I feel like a weight has gone, ma'am. I feel free.
She had her own compulsions that we can understand, but maybe this guilt is not yours to carry.
Yes, ma'am, you are right. This is not my burden to bear.
So thank you, Dr. Navita. So this thing has not happened in just, thank you. This has not happened in just, so this session is accurate, but there is a build up to this whole session, all the history that she has given, all the narrative she has given, and she has talked about so many things. And it is not just, you see, that guilt and trying to win the approval of somebody who doesn't approve of you. That is the worst situation to be in. And you will see, as one of the common factors, people trying to win the approval of generally parents, and the parents denying them that approval because they think that I want something better for my child. Or if you strive harder, then you will get better, then your life will be better. Parents don't have evil intentions. They want the best for their children. They love their children. They love their children more than anything else in the world. But the path to evil is paved by people with good intentions. People don't understand the impact of what is happening. To summarize this, you see, one of the things that we always feel, we believe in stoicism a lot. We value stoicism. He is stoic. Vallabhbhai Patel was arguing this case. In the middle of the case, somebody came with a slip of paper, gave him the paper, he read it, he put it in his pocket. He continued to argue the case. He won the case and then immediately rushed out of the courtroom. His clients were very upset. The lawyer, Vallabhbhai Patel, he didn't even stop to talk to us and all that. It's very rude of him to go away like that. When somebody said that, he got a note in between. No, it said that his wife had passed away. And he still continued to fight the case. That is met with admiration. Probably it is admirable, but that stoicism comes at it comes with a price. See, if we are, our one philosophy can be expose children to hardship so that it will toughen them and they will be able to face the hardship of life easier. Yes, that is one point of view, but it does not take into account the effect of that hardship on a young, vulnerable child with whose synaptic pruning is still going on. Neurogenesis is still going on, circuitry is still being established, and if you put that stress on that child at that point of time, it can change things forever. On the other hand, if you give all the protection which is possible, And as the child grows and matures, you slowly withdraw that protection, you might actually have a better result. So to summarize, what I'm saying is that in the work that I have done, and I may be very wrong, but I have not found the libido theory, the sexual conflict, to be of importance in our society, in our culture, in my work. On the other hand, I have found inevitable role of adverse childhood experiences in the maintenance of chronic depressions and anxieties, in the development of personality disorders, in somatoform disorders, and so many other disorders. And all I'm asking you to do is to be able to spend once a week, every week, 3 to 6 months with patients, look at their histories, identify those things, and connect the dots with the present. That is all that is required. To the question about how many patients can we see, how can we have this much time? We all have the same time. The question is not that we don't have time, the question is how we want to use our time, how we prioritize our time. So I'm going to say something which is not good, please forgive me for that, but I think that one of the things which drives us is number one, the huge number of patients in our country and the limited number of psychiatrists. Number one. And number two, we don't have any procedures. If we want to make more money, we can only do so by having greater numbers. It's a number game. And so what happens is that we don't have time for this. But you cannot put a Lamborghini on the Ford assembly line. Psychiatry is Lamborghini. Just by thinking that we will put everything on the medication because it's the simplest way to do is going to help you 60, 70, 80% of the time probably. It will definitely, no role for psychotherapy in the real mental illnesses. My definition of real mental illness is schizophrenia, psychotic spectrum, bipolar mood disorder spectrum. I'm not talking about the childhood spectrums at all. They are all, most of them are all biological only, no psychological stuff there. But adult psychiatry, I'm an adult psychiatrist, don't work with kids. Schizophrenia and the spectrum, the bipolar disorders, the deep endogenous depressions, psychotic depressions, and OCD. That's it. All the anxiety disorders, most of the depressions that we see, somatoform disorders, personality disorders, I feel that unless we address these recurring patterns, a big chunk of people will fall in the resistant and chronic category, which you can wipe out if you pay enough attention to the histories. There's no need for that convoluted theory. You don't have to understand what is Oedipus complex. I have never used that concept in 25 years, I'm telling you. Never. The need has not arisen. I started out classic psychoanalytic psychotherapist. I was trained like a classic psychoanalytic psychotherapist. It is sacrilege to say that if somebody asks me today, is there an Oedipus complex? I say, I don't know. I have no idea. If it is there, okay, fine. I see the evidence, okay. If I don't see the evidence, I don't feel obliged to follow that. So I'm asking you to think about it like this. How much time can you devote? It depends on your interest and your liking. Every patient doesn't need this. Most of the people respond beautifully to medication. It is when you see this chronic, resistant, recurrent, then you must say that, can I devote an hour, 2, 3, 4, depending on your interest and your time, your needs, I'll devote a little bit of my practice to doing this. Are we going to shorten it? Yes, we can shorten it because we are getting rid of this unnecessary theory. We are working with adverse childhood events and the impact. Today there is tons and tons of literature. I have not said anything, I have given you a fraction. There are thousands of papers on this. There are thousands of papers. We are not talking out through our hat. There is so much data available. You can look it up whenever you want. And you will see that these things are there. So you devote whatever time you can. 90% of the patients I work with in therapy are on medication. This girl whom we are talking about, she's after my life now that it's been a year, drop my venlafaxine. I have dropped it to 150. I have not dropped it any further. I said, we'll drop it. She's saying, I'm well now, I don't want all this. I don't want all this. But we have not dropped it. We have just under 15 minutes. With the permission of the chairpersons, we'd like to open it for questions, criticisms, your own opinions and views. This is not an established theory. This is my work which I'm presenting to you. I'm very open to criticism, to suggestions, to modifications. So please.
Hi. I'm Dr. Jayaprakash. I'm from Erode. I actually came here because I'm the chairperson for the next session.
Thank
And
you
that's
for
how
your
I met,
honesty, sir.
That's how I happened to meet Dr. Srivastava. I think it's a very brave endeavor on your part to have taken your own path within psychoanalysis. And I think apart from your dedication to this, the way you presented this, I believe needs a larger audience, because it is this kind of brief psychotherapy that is actually amiss in the busy clinical practice of most of us seniors these days. And you seem to have somehow successfully balanced psychotherapy and pharmacotherapy in a way which is beneficial to the client, and in a way where it also gives scope for psychotherapeutic work. So I think it is very good, and I think, and I believe, and I wish you all the best. And I wish there was a bigger audience. In fact, I stopped you when there were just 4 people here, and I'm happy for having done that.
Grateful for that.
Right. And thanks to the girls who did the role play. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. That's very kind of you. It means a lot coming from a person like you. Sir, you can use this mic here. There's a mic in the middle, sir.
I'm Dr. Mahesh from Trichy. It was an excellent presentation, sir. I have never seen such a presentations based on the experience you have spoken today.
Sir.
It's not an easy job. Unless you love the job, you would not have done like this.
Sir.
Psychotherapy gives emotional satisfaction when you really connect with the patients, and I can see that you are doing so. One of the things that I would like to ask now is, when we try to understand about the people's emotional trauma or childhood trauma, we sometimes able to see why they feel now like how they feel. During the first episode, during the first session, it's very easy to engage and bring out all the problems that they have faced and the emotional issues they are currently having. But the problem is, in the subsequent sessions, keeping them engaged is a very difficult task. And I feel that sometimes the patients can develop as transference reactions, or they may think that, oh, the psychiatrist has judged me, like, or have they taken it right, or it's a lot of psychological dilemmas they may develop. My question here is how we can deal with this and continue to engage, because even though it's a brief psychotherapy, it takes consistent engagement for 3 months, as you said. So how do we keep engaging and achieve the task of bringing them out of the childhood trauma through the work that we need to do?
Very much, sir. Wonderful questions, all of them. I'll try to answer them. So first of all, I must confess that psychotherapy is not for everybody. It's expensive. 5 years ago, my sister was diagnosed with uterine cancer. We recently celebrated 5 years cancer-free. So we got her over to Hyderabad and we got her operated at Baswatarakam, very famous hospital, Indo-American Cancer Center. And then she underwent chemotherapy and radiotherapy. It cost 23 lakhs. 23 lakhs, the entire thing. So she's an ophthalmologist. We didn't hold that against her, huh? We still got her operated. So my brother-in-law is also an ophthalmologist. KGMC products, sir. Both of them, my sister and my brother-in-law. If we go to a government hospital, can they afford this? No. Is it a fair world? No. Is it a just world? No. Can everybody else afford psychotherapy? Not with me. But the people who can afford it, I want to do it, and I slide down the scale. I see people for 1,000 rupees a session also. I don't see anybody below that. For that, I refer them to my friends here. They are even worse than me. They will accept, okay, what can you pay? 500 for a month? Okay, all right. That kind of thing. It's up to you how much you want. Never charge them more. Psychoanalytic principle. Your fees is suppose 5,000 a session, 3,000 a session, whatever it may be. A rich guy comes up, he says, oh, gold mine. I'm going to charge him 10,000. Don't do that. That is unethical. Whatever your hour is worth is fine. So first of all, psychotherapy is not for everybody. Only a limited number of people can afford it. That is the way medicine is. Medicine is expensive. Everybody can't afford an MRI either, right? So it is brutal, but that is the truth. If we accept it, we'll be more comfortable. Transference. Remember that transference, as the name implies, they are transferring the emotions from somebody else to you. If you remember this one thing, they are not angry with you. They are angry with their father. They have not fallen in love with you. Please look at this. What are we saying? They are transferring another love. If you remember this, we don't get personal on it. We help them to understand what is happening, and we keep it professional, and we keep. There are people who will have severe transference reactions, and they will say that if you're not going to marry me, I'm going to die. It doesn't happen to me. It happens to them all the time. How many people have threatened to die if they don't marry them? One of them is married with 2 children also, but still they want to marry, otherwise we'll die. Nothing will happen, relax. They're not in love with you. Keep your calm. Do not reject a patient. Do not push them away. Don't marry them either. Let us see what we can do, what we can understand, what is it that is happening. Judgment, counter-transference. Sir has asked all the questions in one. Counter-transference is our worst enemy. We always have to keep fighting it. We will like some people, will dislike some people, not just in therapy, in life also. Right? We have to fight it. We have to make sure that we are not judgmental. We have to make sure that if you are judgmental, you are no different from their mother. Therapy will end. It's a relief for them, relief for you also. So we have to constantly fight that. We have to be neutral. We have to be more accepting. Psychoanalysis makes you more tolerant. It teaches you that there is not much difference between us and them. There, but for the grace of God, goes me. What is the difference? We all have our demons. We all are affected by it. So counter-transference, the judgmental thing, we have to always fight. But when we come to that neutral and accepting pose, people you will be able to retain them, sir, because they never had an experience like this in their lives. Nobody listens to them the way we listen to them. They can say that you fat slob, you don't want to make me get better. And I will say, what makes you say that? Why do you think that? Who on earth is going to give them this? They will say that, and what Walt Disney said, I love that. We instill hope again and again and again. They will stay with you. You will become the most important person in their lives because their mothers won't listen to them, their husbands won't listen to them, their wives, even their children won't listen to them the way you listen. It is the recreation of a maternal relationship with an infant actually. Salman Akhtar Sahab said that. Sir, आप जाके बोल मत देना उनको कि अनुराग ऐसा बोल रहा था. He was saying this, he was saying that. So, I have great respect. He is a wonderful person. Navita is a great fan of Salman Akhtar. So she is also going to have it out with me outside. Ki, how dare you say these things? Navita is a great fan. She flew to Delhi because she missed the Hyderabad lecture. She flew to Delhi just to listen to him. You went to Delhi, right? So the thing is that this kind of, he said that when a patient comes to your therapy room, the feeling is of a mother standing in the doorway welcoming the child home from school. That is the atmosphere which has to be created. Salman Akhtar Sahab said this. And I may not go that far, maybe not, but that acceptance. They will stay with us because they cannot get this experience anywhere else. This is a privilege. This relationship does not exist in real life. It's an artificial relationship created for therapeutic purposes. Therefore, I'm sure we'll be able to retain them, sir. Don't be in a hurry to bring about a change. Don't push too much. Don't confront too much. Don't force them to face their demons very early on in therapy. So, have you fried puris? You don't dunk that puri in the middle of the oil. It won't puff up. You slide it in from the side, right? That is how therapy works. Go slowly. Let the patient set the pace. They will come and talk all nonsense, sir. IPL, why Dhoni did this, sir, and why he is not, why is he retiring? Why is he doing that? I don't like that. Saurash Raina, he retired. It's okay, but Chennai Super Kings, they need Dhoni, sir. It's all right. He's filling in the gap. He doesn't want to talk about how hurt he felt when his father said that you are a failure, you are a loser, you will never do anything in life. It will come. Have faith. Have faith. You know what faith is, right? Faith is the ability to believe what we know to be untrue. Have faith in ourselves. It will happen. Nobody wants to go away. The other thing I would say, set the ground rules first. Don't tell them, we will see how many sessions. Don't say that. Be precise. This is once a week, every week. I want you to set aside nothing less than 3 months and probably 6 months for this therapy. I'm going to charge you this much per session. Please let me know if that works for you. Go back. Don't give me an answer now. Never strike when the iron is cold. Never act in the heat of the moment. Go home. Get back to me after 1 week. Tell me if you are on board for this. Please take people who are really committed to this. Our work is hard enough without having a reluctant participant on board. That will not work. Therapy is important for him or for you. It's important for him. Bread doesn't run after stomach. So, tell them how it is. Tell them the truth. Do not pull any punches. I will see it maybe 3 or 4 sessions, maybe a little more than that. When I was younger, I used to do that with the medications. We'll try for 3-4 months, 6 months. Then we will see. Now I tell people, you're going to take this for years. Get used to it. So, don't pull your punches. Tell it how it is. You will be flooded. You will be flooded by people. Don't badmouth psychopharmacology. No, medications. Oh, he wrote you medications. Oh my God, they've got. Why? Medications are wonderful. They are our mainstay. They are our lifeline. Tell them cleanly. You need the medication. You need this. These are different things. Medication will make your depression better in 4 to 6 weeks. Psychotherapy, if the psychotherapy is making you better in 4 to 6 weeks, that is only transference, sir. Nobody gets better in 4 to 6 weeks. So we need both. So I'll rest it with the chairpersons. Thank you very much. I apologize for the wait that you have had. My daughter had a t-shirt. It said, always late, but worth the wait. I hope it has been like that for you. Thank you.
Brilliant session. Brilliant session. And basically, it's a hard work for years, which we have seen in 45, 50 minutes. Hats off to Anurag. You have done a great job. And IPS needs a small, not small, because it's a brief psychotherapy, so brief booklet on this. So I request you. We are working on a book. Okay, you're working? Great. Thank you.
Thank you,
So-
sir.
For that.
We must complete Raghuram Reddy sir's book,
Okay.
Total Awareness Therapy. Raghuram Reddy, living legend of Andhra Pradesh, a senior psychiatrist. He is working on a book called Total Awareness Therapy, which is based on the works of Jiddu Krishnamurthy. So, JK's work, especially for OCD. I must first get him to complete that
Yeah.
because, well, he's 81.
I know.
We don't know how much time we have. So I hope we have a lot of time, but I will complete that work with him. I promise you, sir, this work should not die. These people will ensure that it will not die. But we must come out with a book. You are very right.
No, my request was being a part of IPS publications, rather IPS publications, my brainchild, I started things publishing. So I'll request you to share it with IPS as well. If you think, I'm just, it's a proposal. I don't know whether it will work or not, but just a proposal.
PTSD of that rejection is still with me.
But now, a mother is standing at the door with door welcoming you. So what an informal session. What an informal session it is. So take home point is that brevity is not about time only. It's in procedure as well. So that is important. So now I will not request you to change the name. Brief psychotherapy. Brief means a lot in this. This prefix means a lot. Brief psychotherapy. Brevity is in procedure also, and shedding of jargons as well. So with this, I request my co-chair.
So, thanks for a wonderful session, sir. Really, it was an eye-opener probably for the PG students who may take up psychotherapy. As sir said, don't try for all patients. At least you do for at least 1 or 2 patients, and you will definitely see. As I just want to add a small comment on transference, as sir said, Hillary Clinton once said a beautiful quote on criticism. She said that, I will take criticism seriously, but not personally. So likewise, you take transference seriously, but not personally. So that should be you should take it how to approach transference. And regarding the best question, the award goes to Dr. Mahesh from Trichy.
Now, now I invite the chairperson to hand over the memento to Dr. Anurag Srivatsava. I welcome Dr. Mahesh Rajagopal, Director of Aram Hospital, to deliver the memento to the chairpersons. Now move into the free paper presentation. The session will be chaired by Dr. J. Jayaprakash. I welcome to the dais, sir. Okay.